From the air, a rainforest looks like the emptiest place on Earth. Green, unbroken, 100 miles of canopy with nothing underneath it but trees. For most of the last century, archaeologists suspected that was wrong and had almost no way to prove it. Cutting survey lines by machete, a team might map a few square kilometers in an entire career. Then, someone strapped a laser to the bottom of a plane. The instrument is called lidar. The name just means light detection and ranging, and the idea behind it is almost insultingly simple. The plane fires a pulse of infrared light straight down. The pulse hits something. It bounces back. The instrument times the round trip, and because light travels at a known speed, that tiny delay becomes a distance, measured to within a few centimeters. Now, do that a few 100,000 times per second, while flying in overlapping lanes, like someone mowing a very large lawn. Most of those pulses never reach the ground. They splash off the top of the canopy, off branches, off wet leaves. But a jungle is not a solid roof. It is full of small gaps. And out of every 100 pulses, a few find one, slip down through the whole vertical mess, and touch actual dirt. That handful is the entire trick. What comes back is called a point cloud. Millions of dots hanging in three-dimensional space, each one marking a place where light hits something solid. Software then sorts those dots by height and asks one question of every single one. Are you the lowest return in your neighborhood? Everything above the lowest gets thrown away, and the forest evaporates. What is left is a bare earth model, and the first time you see one, it does something strange to your stomach. Where there was jungle, there is now a landscape with edges, straight lines, right angles, rectangles the size of city blocks, roads. In 2009, Arlen Chase and Diane Chase flew airborne lidar over Caracol in Belize. This was a Maya site they had already been excavating on foot for decades. In a few days of flying, they mapped roughly 200 square kilometers, and the survey revealed agricultural terraces, raised roadways, and dense residential settlement spread across ground their teams had spent about 25 years slowly walking. It was the same site they thought they knew. They had simply never seen its shape. So how big does this get? In 2018, a team including Marcello Canuto and Francisco Estrada Belli published results from the Pacunam LiDAR initiative in the journal Science. They had flown 2,144 square kilometers of northern Guatemala, most of it protected rainforest. Inside that block, they identified more than 60,000 ancient structures, houses, platforms, reservoirs, terraced hillsides, and fortifications, walls and ditches and ramparts, on a scale that implies organized, sustained warfare. That changes the picture completely. The lowland Maya world was not a handful of ceremonial pyramids standing alone in wilderness. It was continuously occupied, intensively farmed, and stitched together by causeways, raised stone roads running straight across swamp and forest between settlements. Why does the ground remember any of this? Because people move dirt, and dirt stays moved. A collapsed wall leaves a low ridge of rubble. A reservoir leaves a depression. A road built up above the floodline stays built up. A house platform is a rectangle of packed earth that is still, 1,000 years later, 20 centimeters higher than everything around it. The forest grows back over all of it, but the forest drapes over the shape rather than erasing it. LiDAR does not see the ruins. It sees the topography the ruins left behind. Which means the same trick works anywhere people built with earth. In Cambodia, Damian Evans and colleagues flew LiDAR surveys around Angkor in 2012 and again in 2015. Everyone already knew the temples there because stone survives and stone gets photographed. What LiDAR exposed was everything that had not survived visibly. the city grids surrounding the temples, mounds, ponds, embankments, and an enormous engineered water network. Up on the plateau of Phnom Kulen, the survey mapped a formal urban layout consistent with Mahendra Parvata, a capital previously known mainly from inscriptions carved in stone. The temples were the skeleton. Lidar found the body. Then the Amazon, where the argument was fiercer. For decades, a common view held that the rainforest soils were too poor and the environment too hostile to support large, complex societies. In 2022, Heiko Prumers and colleagues published LiDAR results in the journal Nature from the Llanos de Mojos in Bolivia, mapping sites of the Casarabe culture. Two of them, Kotoka and Landivar, are enormous. Stepped platforms and conical mounds rising above the plain, surrounded by ditches with straight causeways and canals, radiating outward for kilometers to connect smaller settlements. Nobody had to argue about whether Amazonians built cities anymore. There was a map. But here is where the honesty matters, because lasers are not magic. LiDAR gives you shape. It does not give you age. A bare Earth model cannot tell you whether that platform was built in the year 300 or the year 1300. And it cannot tell you whether two structures a kilometer apart were ever occupied at the same time. A map of 60,000 buildings is not a census. Turning it into one still requires people on their knees in a trench with a trowel, pulling out charcoal for radiocarbon dating and pottery fragments for sequencing. LiDAR also lies sometimes. Natural ridges can look architectural. Under very dense canopy, so few pulses reach the ground that the model gets thin and blurry, and features vanish or appear that are not really there. Every promising rectangle still has to be walked to and checked. What LiDAR actually did was change the question. Archaeologists used to spend careers deciding where to dig. Now they open a map, and the problem is the opposite. There is too much. There are more structures visible than there are archaeologists alive to excavate them, and the list keeps growing every flying season. And there is one more thing hiding in those maps. If the forest is growing on top of terraces, orchards, reservoirs, and roads, then a great deal of what we call pristine rainforest is regrowth. It is a canopy that closed over an abandoned landscape. The trees are real. The wilderness is younger than it looks. So from the air, a rainforest still looks like the emptiest place on Earth. It is the most crowded ruin we have.